Lee and Lori both reminded us in their talks on equanimity that it is a heart practice. This capacity to be at peace with and balanced in the midst of life without so much aversion and wanting is a matter of the heart, an embodied experience, right? It isn't something we can make happen intellectually or cognitively. And equanimity brings that element of embodied wisdom that grounds the Brahma Viharas. We're seeing, accepting, and being with things as they actually are in the present moment with less preference and reactivity. And that's really difficult to do, particularly when the 8 worldly winds are blowing strongly. Praise and blame, gain and loss, success and failure, pleasure and pain. When we're being shaken and rocked by impermanence, by things like old age, sickness, and death, it's really difficult to be peaceful and balanced in relation to all of that. And yet, none of us is going to escape those things, right? There's that equality in the practice of equanimity, that word. And I think we all know this, but somehow when it happens in our lives, it can really feel like something is wrong. We take it personally. So I've thought a few times about how my last talk was focused on groundlessness, Pema Chodron's teachings around how groundlessness really is the inherent reality of our lives. And it wasn't long after that talk that the ground really fell out from under me, from under my life. I got sick with the flu, and after about a week, that developed very suddenly and rapidly into bacterial pneumonia, and I had to be in the hospital. And it was all pretty scary. And while I was in the hospital, my body and my mind were often in a state of alarm and fear, pain and discomfort, a lot of relentlessly unpleasant experience and sensation. And I wanted to share about a particular moment that occurred, I think the second or third night in the hospital, that I felt speaks to equanimity and to a particular layer of it that is about that sort of alignment with truth. So it was nighttime, and as usual, there was a lot of agitation, discomfort, and fear in the body, especially. And my mind was reacting to that, and in a lot of ways, unintentionally adding to it. I think there was still a lot of shock about how quickly things had deteriorated. There were ways that my mind was going to the past, right? Trying to undo what was happening and what had happened, trying to figure out how I got here. Was there a way to prevent this? Did I do something wrong? And it was going into the future, of course, right? Am I going to be okay? What will happen to me? Which was actually quite anxiety provoking, to be trying to move into the future. And there was a thread sort of through all of that I kept kind of sensing this almost thought of, how can it be this way? It can't possibly be this way. This is so awful. Almost like I can't be with this or in this. And maybe each of you has experienced your own version of that. Some sense of like, it just can't be this way. I got to find a way out of this to make it not the reality. And at some point out of that came a realization, became very clear and felt in a deep way that this was what was happening. It was sort of an inner voice, my own voice, saying, it is this way. kindly but firmly, it is this way. And I have got to find a way to be with it and get through it moment to moment. And sort of telling myself, like, I cannot be in the past and I can't be in the future. I can't even be 2 hours ahead of right now, never mind weeks from now. And I probably wouldn't call it full equanimity. um, it's not like there was total peace, but there was some balance there, and it was a big turning point for me. Um, it shifted something and brought a little bit more acceptance and alignment. And James Baraz has shared about a term that Gandhi apparently used called satyagraha. Satyagraha. He defines it as the power that comes from being aligned with truth, a centered response. And he describes how this power that comes from being aligned with truth leads to wise engagement, which he connects to equanimity, wise engagement. And I felt that, even for a moment, the power, the impact of letting go of all of the ways that my mind and body was fighting what was happening. And I felt how even a moment of that gave me some strength and courage and resolve to face and get through a difficult time and help me engage a little more wisely. And it reminded me afterwards of something that the meditation teacher Kitty Saro often shares. He studied in Thailand in the 70s and he struggled with multiple illnesses for a lot of that time. And during one of the acute phases, he was in the hospital and his teacher, Achan Chah, came to visit him. And he said, Achan Chah, it shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be this way. So similar to what I was feeling. And Achan Chah said to him, if it shouldn't be this way, it wouldn't be this way. And I think part of what Achan Chah was saying with kindness and love is don't get caught in that. Don't get caught in it shouldn't be this way, because it is this way. And this practice is about nothing if not recognizing what is here and how things actually are. And Kitty Sorrow has reflected on that and shared that moment a lot, and it came back to me. So a couple of additional thoughts about kind of this moment of realization. It really was, as Lee and Lori said, a very embodied experience. It was one of those moments of kind of knowing a deep truth fully in my mind and heart and bones. And that feeling the truth of how it was didn't mean that I had no preference. I actually still very much wished to be in a different situation. But I knew that that wasn't going to happen. And it didn't make what was unpleasant pleasant. The unpleasant was pretty constant, except my mind heart did quiet and steady a little more and felt a little clearer in relation to all of that unpleasantness. And that was some relief. But I let myself say repeatedly to myself and to others, this is hell. And that was really important, actually, to recognize this is unpleasant. Sometimes I think the near enemy with equanimity, we can, oh, someone said audio has stopped. Can you hear me? You got me? Okay. Yeah, just saying sometimes the near enemy with equanimity can be this sort of faking that everything's okay, or we can pretend that things aren't difficult, right? I'm fine. And it was really important for me to say to myself and others, this is awful. And there's nothing I can do to make it otherwise. except find a way to be with it as it comes and goes in each moment. And sort of that surrender, right? That letting go of trying to control what we can't control. And that shift also didn't mean that I dove deeply into the unpleasantness of it. I didn't dive deep into the fear that was there, or the grief that was there, or the discomfort in the body. I had absolutely no capacity to do any of that. I could recognize it and say, I see you, I'm not denying you. I'm here with this, but I cannot get close or else I'm going to drown. And that too felt, in retrospect, in moments when it was there, a little bit like wise engagement. And in this practice here that we engage in daily together, this is how we learn to have any possibility of accessing the qualities of equanimity in our lives when the ground does get rocked and when the worldly winds hit. And in this practice, right, we work with what's easier on the cushion. We learn to ride those smaller waves and to hold them and learn from them and notice the wobble, as Susan says. And also, I've been thinking about how we're meant to see that the winds themselves, the waves themselves, actually don't matter. They don't define us. They're not controllable. They're constantly shifting. So getting attached to and identified with them actually makes little sense. And that's that sort of wisdom element of equanimity or wise engagement. But my guess is we forget that when we're practicing and in our lives, that it actually doesn't matter what's arising and passing. It's our relationship to it. But we can get caught even on the cushion, sleepiness, distraction, or pain arises, and we can have that same sense of it shouldn't be this way. This shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be this way. I should be able to control this. Or we take personally what's here, what's happening. And in doing that, we miss that opportunity, right? To engage with what is here as wisely as possible, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And so, again, I don't want to act like I am in some constant state of equanimity, but I will say that since that experience, when I've been practicing and my mind and heart and body sort of flies away from what is here, I have been a little bit more able to notice the felt sense of that and come back, even just for a millionth of a second. And I wanted to end with a quote by Kitty Sorrow. He says, "My illness taught me how to die. In other words, how to surrender to what I couldn't change and how to make peace with the painful and confused states of body and mind that I encountered. My capacity for patience deepened. And in moments when I wasn't feeling sorry for myself or wishing my life were otherwise, I discovered that there is a deep part of ourselves that is never sick, that never dies. That unyielding illness, which refused to follow my orders, brought me to a place where I lost everything I thought I was. Then I found what remains, which no one can take away." So, thank you. Thanks for your attention.